Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Vivid Voltage, make sure you go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using the code Omnipoke. For today's video, we're going back to something that I haven't done in a long time, looking at successful deck lists in the format. Now, I'm accepting that we're not going to have official tournaments for a long time, so we're going to be looking at the tournaments that have been played over on the Play Limitless website. There's a ton of online events that you can sign up to right now if you want to. You can see just this week alone, up and coming events. There's a ton that you can register for. They'll all have their own little entry costs or whatever. It's normally just like online packs or something like that, or a few things here and there. And yeah, they've been collating the entire data. And the best thing about this website is they give us so many data points. You get to see the entire metagame of the entire tournament in every one of these because people have to submit their decks through this portal. So we know everyone's lists. We know exactly how many of each archetype was played. We have the rundown of who each person played against. So you can really delve deep into the data when looking at all these tournaments. There's been quite a few already in the Vivid Voltage format. Today's video is going to be based on the events that happened, starting with the Crolo Season 2 Regional Kickoff event up to the 19th, which I think is ending on the Chill Series Last Chance Qualifier. I will be doing a separate video on the ones that have happened more recently, so hopefully we can get a good progression of how the meta's moving as we go through Vivid Voltage, because of course, when everyone has access to this website, they will be seeing the results happen as well, and they'll be adapting their deck lists accordingly. I'll be looking at some of the top players' successful lists. I think because there are so many tournaments to go through, I'm just going to be looking at the top 4 decks from people here and breaking those down and what I like and dislike about them potentially in the new Vivid Voltage format, and almost commenting on what cards have been introduced to the format, if any, what archetypes are being introduced and that sort of thing. And then we'll be looking at a rundown of the breakdown of what decks have made the top 8s overall and their sort of distribution in top 8, top 4, finals and winners. So yeah, that's what the video is going to be. Hopefully you enjoy this sort of movement back towards the competitive aspects of the game, even though we don't have official events. These online tournaments are starting to get enough attention where they're actually becoming really important and useful information for you guys. You can see there's always the player total counts that you can see down here, and there's a number of events that are now reaching 3 figures, which is actually starting to become good data. And these aren't just like random like League Cup almost type events or League Challenge style events that may not carry much weight to them. Now there are still differences between all sorts of different events. Sometimes it's best of 3, sometimes it's best of 1, so there is additional variance in certain events and whatnot. So still take these results with a pinch of salt, but just the sheer number that we're getting information wise each day almost with these tournaments, it's starting to paint a good picture of what's performing well in Vivid Voltage. So that's enough spiel. Let's jump into the Crolo Season 2 Regional Kickoff event. We can see that there was 56 players who entered, and this was literally the day after the release of Vivid Voltage. So if you jump over to the metagame tab here, you'll see that there aren't many like brand new decks coming in here. There was 3 Whimsicott players, 1 Pikachu. There weren't any Colossal whatsoever. Oh, sorry, I'm wrong. There were 4 Colossal decks, so not a huge amount of brand new archetypes, but this didn't give people much time to actually get new decks in the first place. So just do bear that in mind as the days went on, more people had access to the new cards as they came out. Centiskorch was able to win though, and we can see the breakdown of the list here. Very straightforward Centiskorch list, really. Playing Cramorant and Dubwool. Typically you don't see both of these in the list. You often see just Cramorant and Heatran, and then you have a slightly thicker Centiskorch. I'm still personally a big believer of playing a 4th copy of the V because it's super important to get that down on your first turn. Dubwool being a late game swing card that can potentially work in your favor though. Very thick 4 volt count. I really like the basic Pokemon count that they have, the Dedennes, the Eldegoss, the Crobat. I really like double Eldegoss. I'm surprised to see Sinlin in here, to be honest, when you already play double Eldegoss. I feel like this could be better served as like 1 Marnie, one research, or just being, you know, like a Center Scorch. So I think the Sinlin really is the outlier. I think you don't often have too much time to actually weave this in and it feels that effective. So the question mark cards really are the likes of Double and Sinlin. I definitely think it's reasonable to consider the likes of the 4th Giant Hearth, or a Marshadow in your deck to help counteract Swell. Swell is being played a lot in ADP and a few other like Mewtwo-based lists and a few other things here and there. Pikarom often plays Swell as well now. So, yeah, I'm surprised not to see a Marshadow potentially in here as well. Those are cards that I'd kind of think about adding in. But overall, pretty solid, streamlined Center Scorch that was able to take the win there. We'll then look at a couple of ADPs. The first one is Lucas, who was able to make 2nd place in this tournament as this slowly loads up for us. You can see there is a couple new additions in here. There's 2 copies of the new Leon card, as well as 1 Aegislash-V. You can see as well there's a bit of a change up with the basic count, where Milotic's also squeaked into the list. Milotic's not one I'm a huge fan of, to be honest, but you are playing Viridians in this list, so you have no other way of trying to defeat Center Scorch, because you're allowing them to always get, you know, energies pulled out of their deck. Swell is something that can sometimes deny the likes of Welder. Here you're just trying to smack the big Center Scorch instead, which is certainly reasonable. Leon I really do like in the deck. I personally still only play 1 copy and play 1 Eldegoss because it eats into your spaces quite a lot, but there are some certain high roll games where you can knock out your opponent's ADP after you've GX'd, and you completely deny them of Ultimate Ray altogether, so it's similar to hitting like a boss's orders, something like that against them. Also, it's extremely strong against the Luke Metal matchup, where now you can effectively buff the 60 to undo the reduction of 60 that your opponent has with the Luke Metal deck after Full Metal Wall and the Goggles. So that's interesting to see. A couple of one-offs that I'm not like a huge fan of. Like 1 Big Charm feels kind of random. 1 Tool Scrapper is kind of being outweighed by Leon now. I think Leon should be taking the Tool Scrapper space quite often. And yeah, no Eldegoss is kind of strange. I'm also just not a big fan of only playing 3 Zacian, you know. There's some counts here that I think are kind of greedy. The supporter count in general is just very, very high. I know Leon is important to work in, but still maintaining such a high supporter count is a surprise to me. To not see that 4th Cherish, to not see the 4th E-Switch, to not see the 2nd Crobat / Eldegoss, to not see Oricorio GX in the deck either. So a lot of tech spaces being used in this deck. It's going to be interesting to monitor Aegislash-V as well, because so far in results there hasn't been much Decigoons like at all, at least in the first week that we're looking at. So Aegislash gets like 0 value in the game right now, but that could be changing as we move on. So yeah, something to bear in mind. It's going to be a back and forth as always, whether or not it's worth committing the space to it. Also in top 4, we see Adam's list here. And it's slowly getting there. This is much more streamlined in what it's trying to achieve. As you can see, it is just rocking, you know, your main attackers and not much else. It's playing 4 Pokemon catchers and 4 spinners to try and get that off, as well as the 4 E-Switch. So it is like all in on just getting that GX attack and getting into, you know, targeting whatever Pokemon your opponent has vulnerable. Yeah, I think it's a solid approach. It's proven itself in the past. Center Scorch is becoming more and more ability-based, I think, from what we're seeing. Not many greens-based lists are out there right now, and it means that you can capitalize on that archetype as well as, you know, so many others that you can take multiple prize knockouts on, especially with Mawile trying to pull things down onto the board as well. The only thing I would say about this sort of list is if you are this focused on gusting, I would probably play a 2nd copy of Mawile, because you really want to be targeting things, and if they're just not available to you, you kind of feel quite bad about that. So yeah, streamlined, very obvious goal in that you're trying to just make sure you're hitting the right target each turn. Yeah, I think it clearly works. It's a good deal, I think. And finally, we have a Blacephalon here that was able to make top 4. Blacephalon really doesn't gain much from the new set, and you can see there are no brand new cards in this deck whatsoever. No telescopic sights being played, just a straightforward baby Blacephalon. I feel like the archetype is pretty well placed in the format, so it doesn't surprise me too much to see it doing well. I love seeing the one copy of Reshizard. I think it's really integral to the deck. I actually think it's a really important card to have in there. Otherwise, yeah, straightforward. 17 energy is a lot. I think that's the only real surprise. I think with 4 crystal, 2 retrieval, and 17 energy, yeah, that's a huge amount. I think working in calm or extra great balls, I think, is more common quite often. So slight concern there that you may be stellar whiffing more than often, I guess, with this deck. And there's a slight concern about, you know, just bricking or not getting access to the early Intrepid Sword, that sort of thing. So potentially some additional ball search could be considered in this list, but otherwise looks pretty streamlined, straightforward, and yeah, I think the Reshizard is like staple going forward alongside Cram. Interesting to not see Zigzagoon alongside the Cram as well. Oftentimes that's a one-of that you see in the deck, just for more flexibility, and that's just not a thing right now in his list. But there you go. That is the top 4 of the top 8. Also, rounding out that top 8, as we're not going to look through deck list, there was a Luke Metal, 2 Center Scorch, and an ADPZ. Nothing too surprising there. We'll move on to the Pokex Online Challenge, number 4. And it looks like Center Scorch had a really good day in this tournament. It was 4 of the top 8 decks, with 2 of them ending up in the final, so they made it deep into the tournament. There was also a Baby Blacephalon, a Whimsicott from Azul, and 2 ADP Zacian decks. So let's have a look at a bunch more Center Scorch, starting off with Cash, who is playing the ability-based Center Scorch. A couple interesting cards in here. So the last Center Scorch that we saw was playing 1 copy of Sinlin. This time we're seeing 1 copy of Birdkeeper. So clearly the Center Scorch players are looking to have an additional supporter in it, like alongside all of their welder uses and the boss's orders. There's also 1 copy of Great Catcher instead of potentially like that 2nd copy of Eldegoss. That's kind of the only other thing that I would sort of think about. It's playing a thin Jirachi package alongside just the Flare Starter stuff. And surprisingly, it's also playing Talonflame V. I'm not sold on Talonflame V personally in the deck. I feel like oftentimes you choose to go second with the deck, like in the first place, whenever you have the chance. And going first, I still feel like Talonflame isn't like the greatest deal for you. Like if you're looking to have a better start, Talonflame isn't proactive draw. So the first thing I would think about is like, why isn't he playing a 4th copy of Center Scorch V? Why isn't he playing a 4th copy of Calm? Why aren't we saying, you know, an additional Jirachi, an additional Crobat, those sorts of cards? I think those, for me, would take precedent over a Talonflame V, personally, because you're already committing an energy away from the Center Scorch, which is rough, especially when you're going first. When you're going first with Center Scorch, oftentimes you want to build towards the Center Furno just manually, you know? Be threatening 160 to 200 or whatever the following turn, because you can threaten 1 attachment to Senti, and then you can welder and attach up to 4, which gets you to 200 base, which is good into like a lot more Vs than Talonflame would be threatening a 160. So I'm not the biggest fan of the Talonflame. Is essentially the only thing that I'm not happy with, but the rest of the list looks very good to me. Interesting to see no Cramorant either, but it's kind of fine. The one of Giratina is respecting the coating metal energies coming into the format, potentially even weak guard energy on the Orbital players' side. So Giratina, I think, is going to become more and more staple for Center Scorch going forward. We'll see if that is true with the other lists, because there's a ton of Center Scorch to look through. So yeah, I think it's only the Talonflame that I'm not super behind in that deck. Here we're seeing another Talonflame, so proving me kind of wrong. Is this the same 60? It looks very, very close to the one I just looked at. I think the Tool Scrapper's the only card that was different. Yeah, it looks like that was the only card that was kind of different. But yeah, very, very similar lists, so potentially worked on together with the guys. I don't know. But yeah, successful list, clearly. So is Birdkeeper the one-of supporter of choice for Center Scorch going forward? Maybe. We'll see. We have an ADPZ in top 4, so we've already seen a couple ADPZs here. This one is playing double Leon Milotic again. Okay. This is really similar to the previous list that we saw as well. Alright. Okay. I still don't really like these one-offs. I don't know, it's my preference. It feels so random. Like, I know ADP can draw through its deck, like, pretty aggressively, but it still doesn't... I don't feel, like, super comfortable with it, you know? Don't feel comfy with those one-offs. here we have another top 4 list. This is playing the Sinlin. So people just piggybacking on other people's lists. It really feels like it. Or I'm getting baited by the deck list like tracker. We'll see. Yeah, this is playing the double Cramorant combo again. I don't know, maybe people are just seeing the results from the previous day and locking in that exact same deck list. I think that can happen a lot more in online events as well. Something to bear in mind, because you know you can hand in your deck list like 10 minutes before the tournament starts or whatever. So there's a lot more leeway to actually make those changes. The Atlas Collectibles is one of the tournaments that you should pay the most attention to, because it had one of the most amount of players in during these dates. So the Atlas Collectibles actually did have the most players in. It was a 210 player tournament. And I think there's slightly more like prestige around the Atlas Sunday Open, just because it's kind of like more established than some of these other ones that we've looked at so far. Pikachu and Zekrom was able to take out the win. There was also Center Scorch taking up one of the top 8 spots. A lot of ADP, 3 of them. Pedro with his Mewtwo variant, Electric Mewtwo. Another Pikachu and Zekrom making top 8, as well as an Orbital VMAX deck, which started to make some waves and did the rounds and all that good stuff a couple of weeks ago. So I'm sure you've seen that on the ladder by now. Let's have a look at the top 4 decks, though. The Pikachu and Zekrom deck. So this isn't classed as Mewtwo, because sort of Pedro and Toad's variant is playing like Auroras and a bunch of other random attackers. This is really just playing Mewtwo in the deck so that you have type coverage, or sorry, so that you don't have weakness to Colossal is basically it. So perhaps Colossal will begin to add in Mimikyu into their decks to actually shut off Mewtwo and then try and make the Pikachu and Zekrom matchup better. It's weird that Colossal is having to tech for Pikarom, but that could be the situation that we're in. So quite an easy adaptation for Pikarom, to be honest, just to add in Mewtwo. Genuinely gaining that extra 30 hit points is just naturally strong against the Center Scorch matchup as well. So it seems like a really good card to include. I feel like it can be between a 1 and 2 count. That's really up to you. It means that you add in Cherish Balls alongside your Radars. That's the only kind of thing that's a little bit awkward, but by weaving in the Mewtwo from what I can see here. Everything else looks very cool. Pretty streamlined, straightforward Pikarom from there, other than the adaptation of Mewtwo, which I'm a big fan of. Also seeing Vikavolt V sneaking into the list, that could be respect to Whimsicott, so do bear that in mind. Whimsicott basically gets stonewalled by Paralyzing Bolt, so a nice include there as well. Just in general matchups, also, of course, when you're playing E-switches and stuff, you can try and weave this in on certain turns, and combine it with Stamp, combine it with Boss, buy turns here and there while you're trying to, you know, accumulate towards Bolt Storm or accumulate towards, you know, Lightning Ride or whatever else. So yeah, Pikarom will continue to play hammers. I have pretty much no doubt of that going forward, because again, it helps against Senti, it helps against like Eternatus, it helps against ADP even. It's just very strong in the meta, and it has offensive and defensive options. Vikavolt creeping in is something that wouldn't surprise me, because Whimsicott has done fairly well in the early weeks. So Whimsicott may get stamped down the tier list. As you can see, it got 9th in this tournament and does better in the future events. That could get stamped out just by, you know, like ADP is adding in Cryogonal and Pikarom's adding in Vikavolt. So that is an Achilles heel of Whimsicott. If you want to take the free dub against that deck, you can if you really want to, if you're playing those archetypes. So again, we're seeing this same 60 here in the top 4. Interesting. I don't know if I'm getting trolled, but yeah, that's the deck list that I have access to, so I'm not going to go over it again. We have ADP that made top 4. If that one second place list of Senti continues doing well, though, like it shows a good precedent. This is a really interesting list. So this is playing double Scrapper and the 3 Big Charm. I think this is something that some of the Limitless guys, I think Robin played this in an online tournament for the Players Cup too, actually. So I think this was like kind of like a popularized thing during the second Players Cup. Double Tool Scrapper 3 Big Charm. I think the intention is to have some slightly better mirror match situations, and just the 3 Big Charm giving you that little bit of extra hit points on ADP makes it tank that much more in a lot of matchups. Makes life more difficult for like Mewtwo players, makes life more difficult for Blacephalon, a few other things here and there. So That's interesting, and obviously whenever you're putting down the big charms on your own Dedenes and Crobats and Eldergosses and even Mawiles, you're protecting against them being boss KO'd by your opponent in mirror. So that's the idea around big charm in such a high count. And then the double scrapper is to try and stop your opponent from doing that in one instance, but also to help out against the loot metal matchup. I'm surprised to still see double tool scrapper, especially because this list is also choosing to play one copy of Leon. I think this is my favorite support account for ADP, playing 4 boss, 4 research, 2 money, 1 Leon, especially when you do play the 1 Eldergoss. I'm a big fan of that. Fairly surprising not to see like an Oranguru or an Oricorio or anything like that, but I do think the big charms and the scrappers do take their toll. They take up a lot of spaces. But yeah, I think this is, again, a pretty solid list. Interesting to see that the scrapper big charm combo is still being played to such a high extent as it is. And also, obviously, the tool scrappers are good against Pikarom because oftentimes they're trying to big charm their own Pikas. So that's another reason why double scrapper may be important in the format, because Pikarom seems to be surviving the new fear of fighting. It seems to not really care too much. And here we have another gusty build of ADPZ in the top 4 as well of the Atlas Sunday Open. So the heavy gust, ignore your stuff approach is still continuing to thrive. So that's pretty cool. We move on to E&D's Season 2 Qualifier number 1. And that was also won by Pikachu and Zekrom. Also in the top 8, there was a Mewtwo coming in second. Zacian, we have our first Colossal deck, which actually made top 4. Then there's a Luke Metal, Eternatus, a Psychic Mewtwo, and a Dragapult. So quite a varied top 8 in general. Let's see how many players actually played this tournament. Okay, 45. So it's a lower player base for sure. So that kind of contributes to the variance. The most popular deck was still ADP at 13%, Senti at 13%. So the format is still relatively normal. A very high Orbital count. Orbital being very highly played, maybe because it had made waves in a previous tournament like a week during the week. But regardless, Pikarom took the dub, and it's also playing the double Mewtwo, so I feel like that's going to be pretty standard. Again, this looks like one that we've pretty much looked over before. Not too much difference here that I'm seeing from the previous list. This one isn't playing a Vikavolt. That's about it, really. So yeah, that's fine. Another good baseline of a Pikarom deck, for sure. Yeah, nothing too surprising there. We have the Mewtwo deck list. So the distinguishing factor between Pikarom that's playing 2 Mewtwo's and a more heavily Mewtwo-based list is that you are, like I said, playing Auroras, and you're adding in Greninja as a wall breaker, Naganadel as a sniping option, Vileplume as a lower energy attack costing option, and Sirfetch'd as a good type coverage option and something that can jump into that active position and force a 7 prize game in certain situations. So that's kind of the idea behind the toolbox of attackers, from what I can tell so far. Also, playing Auroras means that you open yourself up to Miraculous Duoing if your opponent isn't able to knock out your Mewtwo and Mew tag teams, which also has huge upsides in certain matchups. It's much higher Mani based than the majority of regular Pikachu and Zekroms. It's interesting to see such a high Mani and stamp count, so it's quite it attacks the hand quite aggressively. But yeah, so rather than playing Crushing Hammers to try and disrupt, it plays a lot of hand disruption to just hope your opponent has some like less than good turns while you sit there like electrifying or just working towards your Mewtwo. You know, sometimes you can just do like Massive Bloom early on and stuff like that, because you can happily do 2 energy attachment attacks. Very flexible here, definitely an interesting one to play around with. I'm surprised to not see Vikavolt V entering this deck list, because I do feel like this should get rolled by Whimsicott quite hard, outside of just hand disruption being your win condition a lot of the time. So possibly Vikavolt could be worked into this deck list to flip that Whimsicott matchup from yikes to just like yawning through it. So maybe that's something we'll see for the Mewtwo's going forward. Enrique was playing a straight Zacian Zamazenta deck, which was interesting to see. It's playing Rotom Phones in combination with double Oranguru to try and get additional uses from Intrepid Sword, and just in general, the the Rotom Phone plus Guru combo means you can draw specific cards at the right time, which is very cool. It's playing Toughness Scapes, it's playing one Scrapper. Interesting to see no Leons in here. Just the one-of Tool Scrapper. That's kind of surprising. I feel like potentially if you're playing a pure build, you'd want to work towards some extra damage mods here and there. It's also surprising not to see any Mawile, but I guess in fairness, Eternatus has gone down a lot in play, and I guess you just try and Zamazenta to wall out some matchups. With Coating, going like double Zama is like kind of reasonable against some Sentis now. I don't know. I don't really know this deck's win condition enough. I don't see why this is, like, why you wouldn't put, like, for example, one Luke Metal into this list, or put one ADP into this list, and just, like, why would you not just play one of those cards? Because having those GX stack options are awesome. This build kind of feels like you're really trying to just push Intrepid Sword turn 2, or sorry, push Brave Blade turn 2, and just be, like, a tempo-based deck. And it's also surprising not to see any Turbo Patch in a list like this, because it feels like you could run out of energy quite a lot. There's actually a lot of surprises this list. I'm not a huge fan of it. I feel like its win condition is just, in my opinion, probably weaker than playing just the tag team combos that we have seen do so well for so long. So yeah. Then we have a Colossal that did make top 4 at this event. And it is playing 3 Orangaroos, which I'm a fan of. Interestingly, playing no copies of Dedenne whatsoever. And not playing anything like Rotom Phone or Jirachi Amazing Rare either. I'm really surprised not to see Jirachi Amazing Rare in here. It's like such an easy one-off to have when you're already playing 3 Air Balloons. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't just keep gaining that value in between turns, especially when you're playing Malolanas yourself. But the rest of the list looks really good. I think double Surfetched is definitely like a smart move right now. You need to respect Zamazenta. You need to get through it. You also need to turn the turns where you go Eruption Shot with 1 attachment and make it a 2 attachment turn, to then jump to turn attaching the following turn and having a higher damage output attack than just another Eruption Shot. So I do like seeing that a lot. Wondrous Labyrinth is an interesting include as well. I feel like that's pretty okay. Again, for some disruption, it's got a high Marnie count, so again, trying to attack that hand size, triple buff padding, as well as the double Malolana. I can see why it's going to be difficult for some ADPs to get through this. Is it literally not playing Dedenne just so that your opponent doesn't have easier Gust options? Maybe. It feels kind of weird, though, not to play Dedenne. It's a super good card. And if you're already putting down the, in air quotes, easier prizes, it's surprising that we're not seeing the full plethora of Dedenne, Crobat, and Eldegoss. I'd be surprised. I'm surprised to not see it, to be honest. But the higher Orangaroo count's definitely correct. My Colossal list has moved straight up to a 3 Orangaroo as well, and I still play 2 amazing Red Jirachis. So yeah, that's a new baseline for Colossal for people to work with, which did get a top 4, so fair play. For that, it got a 5-2-1 record. Not super impressive. You can see that it's got some dodgier matchups and stuff like that. You can actually break down the person's actual matchups if you really want to look into it. So yeah. We move on to Hexter Season 3 at number 7. This is the second most popular tournaments that we're going to be looking at within this date range. The Hexter had a Luke Metal Zacian coming in first place, Pikarom second, a Welder-based Mewtwo, and Azul with Whimsicott in the top 4. There was also ADP Zacian, Mewtwo, Baby Blounds, and another Luke Metal rounding out the top 8. So let's have a look at the first place, Luke Metal. A lot of people are touting Luke Metal to be much better in the format because you get to play 3 of this card. And that seems to be the case. This is a hammer-based build, so again, a lot of value in the hammers. 4 goggles, that's a very high count. Maybe that's expecting Scrappers for one thing, or Beetles as well. A few things here and there, so extremely high goggles count. I'm surprised to only see 1 copy of Tag Call, because it's so good to establish early Luke Metal. But I guess you have to make some space somewhere if you're going to fit in the 4 Crushings, so that's kind of something you just have to do. Not leaning heavily into the Tag Call package at all, really. just going for Marnie Hand Disruption alongside Crushing Hammers to buy yourself time with Intrepid Sword. Certainly a reasonable route, so yeah, a nice list of Luke Metal to go off of that's made the space for the 4 Crushings, and it seems to have worked well here. In second place is Pikachu and Zekrom. Yeah, everyone's playing the Mewtwo. I mean, it was pretty obvious, right? You can't just accept that you're going to lose to a Colossal as soon as you see it. So seeing the Mewtwo's is nice, seeing Vikvolt's nice, still having a space for Hammers, all good news, all good things going on there. We're seeing the Welder-based Mewtwo also making top 4, which is surprising. Haven't really thought about Welder-based Mewtwo for a while, so it's going to be interesting to see how this is looking. So it looks to have moved from a Stellar Wish Jirachi build to Amazing Rare Jirachi. I guess you don't have enough spaces. I mean, it's already playing 6... Well, no, it's committing 7 spaces to regular switch outs anyway. I'm actually kind of surprised that when you're making 7... Well, this is even playing Malolana, so it's playing 8 switch outs. I think at that point you just play the Stellar Wish because you have better odds for Welder in the first place, to be perfectly honest with you. So that's surprising. The rest of the engine looks like very similar to previous builds. Palpad isn't super common. Oftentimes Palpad would just be an Eldegoss. Palpad does make your Pokegears a lot more live though, which is kind of interesting if you draw them late on. Seeing Milotic V in here, that's seeing a lot of love alongside Welder. It's kind of just being splashed into things at this point. We saw an ADP list also maining it just because Senti has been doing so well recently, so that's something that Aurora players can be using for sure. It's playing Giratina, a lot of value around Giratina. It's playing Incineroar GX to wall break if people can't one-shot you, which is nice. It basically looks like a traditional Welder Mewtwo that's just moved to the Jirachi Amazing Rare, and I actually think it's really weird to be doing that when you already commit 8 spaces to it. I would just still play Stellar Wish if you commit that much space to them. I guess the idea is that you only play 2 of these Jirachis rather than like 3 or 4 Stellar Wishes. But yeah, interesting to see that make the top 4 with the Amazing Rare. Azul is playing Whimsicott, or has been playing Whimsicott on his stream in the early stages. And this list is playing... So one thing around... So Dusk Gathering Cottony is an interesting one. Initially, I thought Dusk Gathering was optimal because you can just draw a card and bail yourself out of situations. But this has weakness to metal, and it means it can get Steel Fist KO'd. So it may actually be important to be the Psychic Cottony, to be honest with you. Other stuff about the list, he's playing Heracross rather than Latios, and I'm not super sure that Turn the Tables is good enough to win you the game. So I still main Latios. I think it's good enough when you play so many switch outs. I think as more and more Whimsicott has been played, like the community has really enjoyed playing Whimsicott and like figuring out the best way to use it. And I think most people have moved to a lower Lucky Egg count, to have a higher Air Balloon count, just to have more switch outs for that Latios in the first place. So that's something that you can think about for sure. I really like the High Ball Search. 6 energy. I'm kind of floating between 6 and 7 energy in my list. Not a huge fan of the Eldegoss V. I think I would sooner play one Great Catcher than an Eldegoss V. I really like the one-off Hooper. It gives you bailout situations if you prize Rod, just because Hooper can finish things off that you've hit with Flying Fury. It gives you some good protection around Marnies from your opponent and Stamps from your opponent, because you can, again, just knock things out that you've put in really easy range with Flying Fury earlier on. I guess Azul is playing the Fion, so you don't necessarily need to play Great Catcher in addition, so that's kind of good. Outside of that, I like the list. I think it's pretty sound. Yeah, seems pretty okay. I think with a number of these one-obs, you could consider playing a very small amount of scoop-up nets, like 1 to 2. Just because if you start with the likes of Heracross, Hooper, Mew, Oranguru, these sorts of cards, you can scoop up net them to clear board space to have extra Cottony spaces, because that can sometimes low-key be an issue when you've already committed to other things around the board. Maybe that's just me, though. But yeah, Whimsicott's done pretty well so far. It seems to be one of the stronger one-prize decks. Yes, it has the Achilles heel of just losing to the sight of a Vikavolt or the sight of a Cryogonal if you haven't already established your tools before then. For the Cryogonal's spot anyway. It's much harder for you to beat Vikavolt because it's tankier. So yeah, it certainly has an Achilles heel, but it's one of those decks that could remain under like the 5% of play and many people may just like not respect Whimsicott enough to tech for it immediately, so yeah. However, Whimsicott did also make second place in the Pokemob Standard Tournament. Pikarom was the winner though. Let's have a quick scout at Pikarom. We've looked at a ton of deck lists at this point. There hasn't been a huge amount of variation actually so far. Again, this is a list that we've seen before, basically, I think. Oscar with the Whimsicott, is he playing the same 60 as Azul? Yes, that's the list that we have to see anyway. The Mewtwo, is there much variation here? This looks to be playing a very similar counts of everything that we've seen before. Not too much difference here to previous lists that we've looked at earlier on. This one isn't playing. There's definitely a card that it's not playing, Pokemon-wise. I can't tell, though. Anyway, these aren't super different. These could be like 1 or 2 card differences. Baby Blacephalon with 19 energies made it. Wow. You know when I said 17 was too many? Like, wow, 19. That's wild, bro. That's so many energy cards. Think of the clunk factor. Who cares? You just kill people. At least I like the extra Great Ball. Playing Mewtwo without Oranguru maybe is a little weird. I guess Oranguru is a lot of bench space anyways. Yeah, maybe just Mewtwo as is fine with Scoop Up Net. Yeah, that's fine. I can agree with that. Man, 19 energies. Again, I haven't seen many Blacephalon playing Marshadow, but I feel like it's a decent card with a good amount of Pikaroms, Mewtwo's, and ADPs all playing Swell into your face. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, 19 energy. Wild. Doing bits out here. Playing no energy retrievals, just saying, I just want the raw energy cards to win the game. That's mad. Is this... Okay, and this wasn't playing any Reshizard either. I kind of like Reshizard as a card. I would definitely put it into my 60. Okay, so that's the top 4 there. The other top 4s were more Blounds. So Blounds made a bit of a resurgence, and there was also a Center Scorch. Couple more tournaments to look at. Full Grip Games Online Series 5 was won by ADP Zacian. We actually haven't said that much today. A couple Center Scorch, second place, and also in the top 4, as well as an Eternatus, which has seemed to have, you know, it's got way, way less popular by the looks of things. Luke Metal, ADP, Blounds, and another Orbital rounds out this top 8. So let's have a quick gander here at the ADP. So this is again a slightly different ADP. It's actually playing one Amazing Rare Jirachi. I actually think one copy of Amazing Rare Jirachi is way worse than playing one copy of Oranguru. That's just my personal opinion. I think there's far bigger upside to playing Guru overall. You can protect around Marnies, which is played in so many decks. And Oranguru is like always live, whereas the Jirachi Amazing Rare you can only weave in if you're already pivoting with Switch and already have an Air Balloon established. And there's more people playing Tool Scrapper right now, so yeah, I actually think Amazing Rare Jirachi isn't the best card to include in the deck, just from my personal preference. This deck has made the space for double coating. Again, I don't know how much I like this, because there's going to be those games where you Ultimate Ray and you don't actually have enough metals in your deck, and there's going to be those situations where you draw the coatings when you need to have Saucer activations and you make your Saucers less live. So you're hitting yourself 2 times over with your energy acceleration, and chaining attacks, especially when ADP dies after Alter Creation, is like the only way you stay in the game and win. So I actually really dislike the coating metals in ADP. I think it only works in Luke Metal. Again, this is making space for Aegislash. Yeah, this isn't a list that I like too much, to be honest. It's playing no Stadium either. No Stadium I can actually get on board with, because there's so many decks playing Swell. You just let them play their Swells and just say, why should I play Swell when everyone else is? What Stadiums are you most afraid of? I guess you're most afraid of Blounds and Center Scorch, so having the coatings, I guess, is the theory behind making those spaces. But when you're making those spaces, you still have to have a high count of physical basic energy cards. Like, I still think you should have at least 7 metal energies in the deck, even with double coating. I would probably drop a Spinner or drop a Scrapper. Mew is super interesting. Like, I'm really surprised to see Mew in it. There's so much on this list that I'm just confused by, to be honest with you. Mew is in here. This list is wild. I actually can't comprehend this deck list. But it won, so yeah, it went 7-0, by the way. So there you go. Mahone was playing Senti. I liked the include of Fion in the deck. That seems very cool. That seems like a shout, to be honest. That seems very good. I like the baby Pokemon lineup. It's still playing Stello-ish. I like this list a lot. The only thing that I don't like about like every Senti list that I've seen, literally every Senti list I've seen, everyone's playing a 3/3 line. And you need to, you know, attach to it, find it in the first place. This one, Mahone's also not playing any Heatran or Cram, so like, if he's like prized a Senti too many, he just loses the game immediately. So I like play 4, you know. That's just one man's advice. He's playing the Labyrinth, so Labyrinth Stamp combo is a nice comeback for the deck. But yeah, I am a big believer of just maxing out counts in the game. So yeah, just me. More 3/3 lines, more Talonflames. I'm starting to get a little tilted by these Center Scorches. I mean, they're winning, so I can't question them that much, but I just okay. we see the first Eternatus that we've seen in a while. It looks pretty normal. It's not a poison build, it's just a straight build. I guess you're just taking that hard L to Luke Metal with this list. It's not even trying to play Sableye or anything like that. It's just saying let me dodge or let me take an L and take lunch or something. But it's playing quite a consistent list. It's made the space for 1 drill, which is fair. 4 catcher seems quite high. Makes me kind of nervous that you're going to miss dark energy drops here and there. So I kind of would like to see probably just a flip-flop of a capture and a dark, and it would make me feel a lot better about myself. Only playing 2 boss is actually quite surprising as well. Playing a really low count, so it's trying to play as much insta-play as possible to draw as much as Crobat. So you can see the theory behind this list. This is just a couple counts that I think are questionable, but overall it's just saying like, yeah, you know what slaps? Eternatus. That still slaps. So there you go with the Full Grip online series. And then finally we have the Chill series LCQ. I believe this was also played by a good number of people. Yeah, 131 players, so just a little bit less than the Hexter, but still a decent number of people getting involved. And it was won by a Altaria control deck, of all things. So getting my head around this is going to be hard because I haven't thought in the control mindset for a little while. Obviously, you don't have any infiniteness anymore with this list, so you're trying to eventually wall people out either by boss trapping with item lock for a number of turns because you're only hitting 10 damage per turn with your Cryogonal, or you're trying to win with just a 2-2 Altaria line and saying, lol, you don't have the answers to beat this for certain archetypes, which again could be the case. It's got Make and Pay Persian to, that's your only really active mill or like discard of resources for the opponent. So that's something that gets involved. You're snack searching cards back to end your turn in a lot of situations as well, by the looks of things. To have some recovery of the likes of dolls and that sort of thing. It's playing 2-2 Airmail as your only draw alongside Zacian. The one thing I will say is that Bird Boy 2000, the player who won with this deck, whenever I see him on the ladder, he is solo playing control. It's all Bird Boy 2000 ever plays, and I come across him on the ladder like a good amount of times. He plays a lot of Pokemon, so this guy takes pleasure in building control decks, so I'm sure he will have better reasoning than I can ever come up with for that list, and he's done well with it, so I can't question that at all. Another huge surprise for me was seeing this Galarian Darmanitan Inteleon Frostmoth deck have space in 60 cards to actually be built all at once in the first place. Also the fact that he had a 1-1 Barraskewda line in here as well. So he's playing 4 stage 1s in his deck and he got 2nd place. Like, that's already like mad props because that just goes against my entire psychology of Pokemon, to be honest. It's like, I'm very much a player that likes to make a plan A and try and make that happen as much as possible and have some fallbacks. This list is like, if I can do this in this situation, I can have the fallback of this in this different spot, and like so much wiggle room all over the place. Like, it's really wild. The core counts of 3-2 Inteleon and 3-2 Moth are the most important ones, which I think are okay. I'm still kind of queasy by the Pokemon counts, because it is integral for you to find your Snom, and it is integral for you to find either Darmanitan or Inteleon based on what matchup you're in. Obviously, the idea is the Darmanitan can be the one that tries to carry you in the Lightning-based matchups, and Inteleon's the one that carries you whenever you're up against ADP and Luke Metal. So that's the reasoning behind those. Made space for one telescopic sight. God bless. I think that card is super good on Inteleons. Yeah, I mean, I just look at this list and think it's kind of cluttered, and you could make cutbacks, and I would like to think that your win rate would improve because you just do the things you want to do more often. But, you know, he's got the dub. I can see a mix match of, you know, I can see a 1-1 Darmanitan going into a lot of Inteleons, and I would be kind of okay with that. But the 1-1 Barraskewda, it's a harder sell for me. I'd like to have more Ball Search in here, or just a higher comm count, maybe a second scope. More buckets as well. Buckets are like integral to actually hitting your turn 2 attack. I'm surprised to just see 2 copies because the card is nuts. So yeah, a lot of counts that I would play around with here. But lots of things to play around for your opponent, right? Lots of things for your opponent to play around and be aware of and be scared of to a certain extent. So if it comes off, it comes off. And it seemed to go well that day, as it went 9-2-1. Pretty cool. We see a welder-based Mewtwo from, I think this is Danny. And he's playing he is playing Vikavolt in his list for the welder-based build. So again, respecting Whimsy. Playing Gengar Mimi for Horror House, which is super gross in certain matchups. It's also playing the Milotic. So it looks like Mewtwo's becoming a type coverage box kind of thing with the Sirfetch'd, the Milotic. Vikavolt is a counter to Whimsicott and can help out against some Inteleon-based decks as well. So yeah, you're becoming basically a type coverage toolbox really at this point. Seems decent though. I like the engine. It seems reasonable to play. So this list is only playing the 6 outs to switching, so it makes more sense to play the Amazing Rare Jirachi than the previous lists, and he's playing Marshadow to actually have outs to swell, which I certainly respect. So yeah, decent list there. I think that makes a lot more sense to me. It's kind of taking the same approach as the Mewtwo deck, but just with Welder as the acceleration instead of just Coco, basically, and Boltund. But there was also a Mewtwo that also made top 4, and it looks identical to the other list that we've seen previously. I think people are just accepting that the guys had it right the first time with the Mewtwo variant in the first place. It takes a brave person to question the likes of Tord and Pedro, to be honest. So yeah, that was a lot of discussion around deck lists. One final thing I just want to end on was closing on the placements and the amount of placements each deck got over the tournaments that we've just discussed today. Center Scorch and ADP had the highest number of top 8 and better placements, followed by Baby Blounds, interestingly. But Baby Blounds had a terrible conversion in the top 8 for the most part, which is also quite interesting because you think it's still well placed in the format, but it seems to have just been running into each other in mirror matches in some cases, running into Whimsicots, I think, as well in some other situations. So potentially Baby Blounds unlucky to just be sat on the top 8 side of things rather than the second and first place kind of things. Pikachu and Zekrom had the most first place finishes, which is pretty interesting. And Centiskorch was the only other deck to get 2 finishes. So yeah, also there was a total of 16 different decks all making top 8. So good variation so far. I've only just realized that you guys can't see the entire screen. There you go. You can actually read the names now. I didn't realize that I'd slightly offset my my screen, but yeah, that's a list of the decks that all made top 8 or better in these tournaments. Do bear in mind, once again, like I want to reiterate to you, that sometimes these are like 50 to 60 player events, and you know, anyone can have a good string of matchups and stuff like that to just make top 8 in the first place. So I think as the weeks go on and we see more and more total placements being added to this little spreadsheet, that we'll have a better idea of the actual top contenders. So far, it looks like ADPZ not going anywhere. Centiskorch has been a front runner so far as well. I think it enjoys seeing a lot more tag teams. There's a lot of, I mean, there's some Milotics going in like the Mewtwo decks, but I think you're pretty okay into Pikarom. I think you're pretty okay into most of the Mewtwo players. I think you're decent against ADP for sure. So yeah, I think things to look out for in the future weeks would be keeping an eye on Whimsicott. Now, it only got 3 top 8 placements, so it is actually worth teching against. Well, I think if you're Mewtwo, you probably should play Vikavolt if you're playing Mewtwo, or if you're playing Welder-based with Auroras. Pikarom potentially could, potentially couldn't. I know a space in the deck does mean a lot, so yeah. Things that I would expect to be doing better right now. Not too much that surprises me, to be honest. Colossal, it's had a slow start, and I think it's potentially not strong enough in the format to really compete. I think it's not great into Centiskorch, and I think it's not great into Luke Metal, so the format's not ideal for it right now, just yet. So potentially an uptick in Eternatus again as things sort of stabilize. At the same time, Pikarom is still around, playing a bunch of hammers. Luke Metal's still around, so there's reasons to not like Eternatus either right now. So yeah, things are working out pretty well. Do bear in mind this was just the first week, and people were sticking to tried and trusted stuff much more than they were trying new stuff. So yeah, long discussion, but I will be back tomorrow looking at week 2's results as well, and we can compare it to week 1's and see how the meta has changed. So hopefully you'll enjoy this type of stuff. If you did, leave a like down below, comment as well on anything that I missed, and what you thought your favorite deck was, etc. What are you playing in this new Vivid Voltage format? We'll get the discussion down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.